You saw the rollout of all of the border-related security, immigration executive orders last week, and then you saw Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt come out with a picture of migrants actually being loaded onto C-130s and taken out of here, which is just like...
That's what we voted for.
I mean, this is exactly what we voted for.
Donald Trump is just shipping criminals out of this country, and you're like, but what about the Valentine's Day flowers? Get the hell out of here.
This is why it's a bad thing.
And they're like, coffee's going to be expensive.
I don't have to tell you Americans are ready for what's next. Moving beyond the hardships of inflation and economic anxiety towards building a future, a better future for our families. Ensuring greater access to more affordable energy that powers daily lives, reliable energy that fuels innovation and economic growth, and the abundant energy that keeps our nation safer and more secure. It's all within our grasp. We'll do this together, building a brighter future for us, powered by America's oil and natural gas resources. You can learn more about all of this at api.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please.
Just a catching strays over here.
You're in for a hell of a show.
Keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs.
It's time for our main event.
Good Tuesday to all of you. Welcome back to the Ruthless Variety Program, happily presiding over the golden era, Mr. Trump's golden era here in Washington, D.C. And throughout our land, I am Josh Holmes, along with Comfortably Smug, Michael Duncan, and John Ashbrook, left to right across your radio dial. Fellas, there's a time for singing and dancing and entertaining. We like to do that here in the Variety Program. But, you know, when you've got this much news, this is sort of a bread and butter shtick for us. We do this better than anybody. There's like stuff here. You got to know.
That's the thing is, President Trump made promises when he was running for office, and rapidly, I think faster than any of us could expect, he is fulfilling those promises. Work is getting done, and along with that means there's a lot to cover, and work that needs to be done and is in the process of getting done.
Yeah, I think we all missed it, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, the sort of increased flurry of action.
The workload, so to speak.
We sort of missed that as a country the last 4 years. You know, I also think the media appreciates it. They'd never tell you.
No, they do, though.
But there is a lot going on, a lot cooking.
Yeah, they like to complain about how hard they're having to work.
Yeah,
they like to complain. They're miserable people.
There's like actual news to report on.
Yeah.
But Mr. Trump spent his time in office learning how he could do things better, and he improved upon it. And now we're seeing the results of all of that work that he did leading up to last Monday.
Is that your JD hat?
This is so JD actually has my hat.
Oh, he actually.
So I had.
I didn't realize you actually gave that up.
I gave him my hat, so now I had to go into the system and order a new one. Very happy to have the new one. So I encourage everybody to get in the merch store and make Michael Duncan do some
what
work.
we're talking about, for those of you on the audio only, he's got a nice camouflage Ruthless hat, which it might have been a one of one, and somehow Ashbrook got his hands. I didn't even know the thing existed. And then all of a sudden, now Vice President Vance, then Senator Vance, joined us for a fishing trip. Next thing you know, JD's wearing one. And I was like, where the hell did that come from?
Okay, so the backstory there is we sort of just made like a couple up on spec.
Is that what it was?
Like, yeah, sometimes we have some like trial runs of merch that sort of float around the office. And I think Ashbrook picked one up.
I loved it.
Because
that's a great hat.
Because we had the fishing trip coming up.
Yeah.
And so it just happened to be that like JD was like, hey, can I have that hat? And you were like, yeah, absolutely. And so then like we had to order a ton of them because everybody wanted it.
I saw a clip just circulating this weekend about all of that. When he
Yeah.
was talking about how he handled debates and whatnot. That thing's got a long tail. People
Long
really
tail.
enjoyed that fishing trip.
Yeah, I mean, he went on. We're going to talk about it. He went on Sunday shows again.
Yeah, we got that.
Another victim.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk
So
about
people
that.
just
Poor
good stuff
Margaret
pops up.
Brennan.
Oh, I don't feel bad at all.
I don't either.
Not
but,
for a second.
But boy, it has to be tough to stomach. I can't imagine slinking back into the office Monday morning after that kind of a beat down. But, you know, I guess they don't know a lot of shame. So, you know, maybe it's easier than it looks. And certainly from my vantage point, you'd never see me again. We're going to talk about immigration. We're going to talk about the Colombia situation, put a fine point on that. A lot of news, and we'll just tell you what it all means. Dr. Phil was out which I love. We got some clips we're going to talk about Dr. Phil and the immigration border thing. Fantastic stuff. A variety. We're going to get into, last week we talked about AI, the importance of the announcement that the president made with the CEOs last week about American development of AI. You quickly found out a week, not even, 5 days later, how significant that discussion is this week with Deepseek and Chinese and what that's done to the marketplace. We're going to walk through a little of that. This is a hobby horse with Smug. He knows a great deal about it, and all of us sort of jump in on it because we like it a lot. We happen to think it's the future. And then we've got some other variety. Eagles fans. Which in my house, fellas, it's not good. It's not good. For those of you who don't know, my wife's a Philly native through and through and a huge Eagles person. And she's converted my two sons. And I have no recourse because I'm a Vikings fan. And the year my oldest son was born, the Eagles won the damn Super Bowl, beat the Vikings in the NFC Championship. It's been downhill ever since.
Well,
There's nothing I can do about it.
I don't want to give up the surprise too quickly, but we have a care package of batteries that we're sending to her to throw at the screen when the refs call everything for Patrick Mahomes.
You're going to break my house.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. It's like buying me a drum set. Just something that makes my life more difficult. We also have the guest that everyone wants to hear from. In my view, one of the top 5 most important people in this entire country right now, maybe the world, if you think about it. Jason Smith. He is the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee in the House of Representatives. And you're like, okay, well, I don't know Jason Smith. He doesn't do a ton of interviews. He's writing the damn tax bill. Yeah. So if you're interested in money in your pocket, you should listen to what this guy has to say, because he is the guy who is putting together the formulation for ultimately what you're going to be looking at next year and filling out your W-2 and the 1040 and all of that. He's going to have a huge impact on it. What he has to say has a material impact on you and your families. I think we're the only ones that have a discussion like this. So, like I said, this is what we do best.
Yeah. It's a good one. It's like you said, could not be more important for every single listener.
Totally. All right, so let's get in the deportations thing real quick. New York Post, Colombia's President Gustavo Petro buckles under Trump's trade war threat, offers presidential plane for deportation flights. Let me just give you the backdrop, and then we'll talk about it for a minute. Colombian President Gustavo Petro quickly reversed course about accepting flights, which he had previously said he was not going to accept. During last week's conversation, these flights were headed out of the United States with illegal immigrants bound for Colombia who had originated there, and President Petro said, nope, you're not landing here. Well, here's what happened. President Trump threatened emergency tariffs of up to 50% on the South American country for refusing to cooperate. Petro not only acquiesced to Trump's demands, he even offered up the Colombian presidential plane to help shuttle the migrants back to the country, calling it a response to, quote, the government's commitment to guarantee decent conditions.
That's art of the deal right there.
Yeah. I mean, look, one more paragraph. The government of Colombia, under the direction of Gustavo Petro, has arranged the presidential plane to be facilitated a dignified return, as they say. This is his quote, and this is what a dignified return is. Well, it's a return, nevertheless, which is the only thing that we're ultimately interested in. But you saw the rollout of all of the border-related security, immigration executive orders last week. And then you saw Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt come out with a picture of migrants actually being loaded onto C-130s and taken out of here, which is just like...
That's what we voted for.
I mean, this is exactly what we voted for. And then at the end of the week, you got... And the press was just so eager to be like, well, they're not going to take them. So, this is just like not going to work. At which point, as you just heard from the New York Post, Trump was like, well, what if I just slapped a 50% tariff on everything that you have? What do you think about that?
To me, this was such a very, it's a fascinating microcosm because you saw the press instantly flood the zone, jump in. They're like, oh, look, Colombia said no to Trump. Trump got owned. Oh, my God, he can't do anything about this. Mm-hmm. Everyone is in the frame of thinking and mindset of how things used to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You'd expect, oh, God, this is probably going to become a 6-month process. There's going to be some legislative issue that's needed.
Yep.
And then AOC is going to cry in front of a plane. And then it gets solved in hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Trump's like 50% tariffs until you bend the knee.
Yeah, and
Done. Done.
I love it so much because think about how much time Washington has talked about the immigration issue. I remember in 2005 when I was a press secretary and we were orchestrating these like field hearings at the border to get to the heart of the immigration issue and fix the border. Donald Trump, within days, picks up the problem and he solves it. So 20 years of people just complaining about immigration and complaining. This is a man of action. It's exactly what we voted for.
Yeah, everyone just sort of gets used to the muscle memory of the morass of D.C.
Yeah,
And
totally.
especially when it comes to executive orders. It's like they get signed and there's a ceremony, but you always wonder about the follow through. And like what happens in that intervening period where there's legal challenges or things happen or countries say, oh, they're not going to take these migrants back. And then Donald Trump's like, nope. 50% tariff. It's like everybody is playing the wishbone offense, and then Donald Trump showed up and invented the Ford Pass.
He's going 5 wide.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, we always could do that.
Yeah.
People just didn't do it. And
Yeah.
it's like because he has, he's just so driven to accomplish these things and deliver on these promises from the campaign that like we're really going to do it, and we're going to use every tool at our disposal to make sure that we follow through on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Don Coryell of the 1970s NFL, right? It's just
Air
a
Coryell.
different thing going on here.
I like that.
What I also love is you look at how quickly this unfolded. Like, everyone on the left thought this was the same way things happen. They started being like, heads up, folks. Don't you know half our flowers are
Dude,
imported
that's
from
the funniest
Colombia?
thing.
You're paying more for Valentine's Day. It's like, number one, Donald Trump is just shipping criminals out of this country. And you're like, but what about the Valentine's Day flowers? Get the hell out of here.
This is why it's a bad thing.
And they're like,
things-
coffee's going to be expensive.
What I loved about it as a poster on X, and I'm sure you did as well, Smug, was the funniest about it is like the problem got solved so fast. It got solved before the left could even get out the
They
talking
couldn't even
points.
wrap the 450 words
Yeah.
in the Washington Post opinion section,
Yeah.
right? And they were all fully prepared to talk about the price of coffee. And then like, oh, yeah, never mind. We're moving
They
forward.
signed out to like some idiot a story. Can you please write about what effect this will have on Americans
Oh,
and
yeah.
how it's going to drive up costs for the poor on their coffee? Because they always like they try to frame everything like that. Washington Post just had a story about how DEI hurts poor communities.
Yeah.
It's like
I mean, and you could write that lead. Any of us could, right? Like the lead of that story would be Donald Trump ushered into office on a wave of a bad economy and high inflation is about to make it worse.
Yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
they were so ready
They were
to go.
ready. That editor must be so pissed.
A populist brand of nativism has taken over the federal government as they've ushered in what could be hugely consequential economic conditions for the American people.
They were so ready. Dude had that up on Word, and then he gets a news flash. Sorry, Trump already solved it. Colombia surrendered.
I mean, for real. But that's the way this has gone so far. And again, I think to the point that you opened up with, Smug, like they've been very prepared for this stuff. And Ashbrook, you mentioned it. I mean, they have thought through what they're willing to do. So when you get the deep state, Department of State guy who spent, the last 40 years in Central and South America saying like, no, you can't do that because there will be retaliatory measures. Like they're like, get the fuck out of here. And they're like, they just go do their thing anyway.
Because they know as well as anybody that whatever happens with coffee, whatever happens with flowers, the market for bullshit has no cap on it.
Yeah.
And they
That's pretty
are
good.
100% going
pretty
to
good.
trigger a bunch of bullshit from the Washington Post and the New York Times and Politico just wringing their hands about how terrible this is when he's actually solving the problems that everybody's been asking somebody to solve for 20 years.
Yeah.
Well, they're getting a little daytime TV help too. And so when we come back, you're going to see, you will not believe who is, part of the enforcement mechanism walking the streets of Chicago to make sure that people come back home. You're going to love every minute of this right after this.
So we just got some big news from Americans for Prosperity, the most effective grassroots organization in the country. They've just launched a massive $20 million campaign to protect your hard-earned money. Here's the deal. If Congress doesn't act, the Trump tax cuts will expire. That means families could pay $1,500 more in taxes next year. We all remember the benefits of those tax cuts: more money in your pocket, higher wages, and thriving mom and pop businesses across the country. But Bidenomics has taken us backward. Record inflation and rising costs mean families are paying over $13,000 more per year just to make ends meet. Now is not the time for higher taxes. That's why AFP is unleashing its grassroots army to protect the tax cuts with hundreds of local events, millions of voter contacts, and direct pressure on lawmakers. Join the fight. Visit protectprosperity.com to demand Congress renews and strengthens the Trump tax cuts so we can reignite the American dream. That's protectprosperity.com.
Okay, so, I mean, look, the whole pop culture thing for conservatives and Republicans just come running back for the first time in my lifetime. Like, we've got the people, and, like, stuff's cool with us. And never before, though, did I think you'd have, like, prominent daytime network TV people. They're involved in, like, conservative governance. They're interested in how it works, nuts and bolts. You won't believe this. Have a look at clip 1, please.
Are you a citizen?
My mom's a citizen.
Your mother's a citizen?
Yes.
But
Dr.
you're not?
Phil.
Nope.
But you've never been deported before?
We Dr. Phil. We got Dr. Phil.
Yeah? How do you know me?
No, I seen Dr. Phil, on TV.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is an example of sanctuary cities, right? We got an illegal alien convicted of sex crimes involving children. And he's walking the streets of Chicago. Again, the downfall, the problem with the sanctuary city, that people like us walking the street rather than local law enforcement working with federal agents. This is what we're dealing with. Yeah. You've been charged with sex crimes with children?
Not really.
Not really.
Not really? And never been deported?
Nope.
Huh. Let's take them in and process and lock them up.
There you go, Homan.
Yeah.
I think this is a great, example of what we should do is every time you catch an illegal sex offender who has attacked kids, Dr. Phil's there waiting. It's like the dude who used to be like, why don't you grab a seat over there?
Yeah.
And he used to
Chris Hansen.
Chris Hansen.
Yeah.
Now we're sending Dr. Phil. And also, shout out Dr. Phil for getting hooked up like that to have Tom Homan be like, you want to go on a raid, bro? I would love to go on a raid, Tom. I want to be there when you kick in doors and drag illegals.
Can the
out.
variety program do a ride along on that?
Yeah.
That would be.
I don't even need
pretty
cameras
good.
just for fun.
It would, but there's a couple of things that I love about it. One is, like Dr. Phil's doing Dr. Phil's thing, right? He's trying to let this guy talk, and this guy like quickly assesses that like talking's not going to do any good here for him.
I've seen your show.
Yeah,
Talking does me no favors.
yeah. And Dr. Phil's like, oh yeah, and then just like lets it sit to see if the guy will fill the space. Like he ultimately did. The second part that I love is you got Homan walking around like Elliot Ness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
It's so nice to have one dude in charge of this stuff.
Yeah.
Where he's like actually marching the beat and he's like, book him, Dano.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Exactly.
When you said it right there, it just struck me the difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration. In the Biden administration, things are going wrong. They were always arguing over whose fault is it. No, we appointed Kamal the czar of this. Or no, it's not that guy. It's someone else's job. Here, where the buck stops, who's in charge of it, proudly, because they want to execute on their job. Homan's their front center because he's like, I was told to do a job of get these illegals out of here, and you see me, I'm doing it right now.
Yeah, I'm going to show you how it's done.
Great to see that.
Meanwhile, they're like, Kamala's the border czar.
Yeah.
Or actually, she's just investigating the root causes.
The root causes.
Which turns out is her. She's the root cause.
Yeah, who'd have known? You don't need to figure out the root causes to put them in a cop car and get them out.
Yeah, jeez. I mean, it's just, it's incredible. So anyway, this is all going on in Chicago and cities across this country where they're actually taking criminals off the street. I mean, that guy, child sex predator?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? How is that ever a question? How is that not a top priority? Are there that many? I mean, it's Chicago, so maybe.
But like in across this country, are there that many higher priorities than getting sex predators off the streets?
That should be up there.
It seems like a no-brainer.
Like if you're just if you're a run-of-the-mill sex predator, you know, where you're just sort of sitting in suburbia, you got to imagine your timeline is real short. Like they're going to get your ass in the brig pretty quickly.
Yeah.
At least I hope so. Although the DAs, the Soros, it depends if you're in a Soros jurisdiction or not.
Yeah, but
I
if
guess.
it's Dr. Phil knocking on the door, bro, it's a wrap.
Yeah,
it's over for you.
It's a wrap if Phil shows up.
Right.
No question.
Especially if he's standing next to the modern-day John Wayne, Tom Homan,
Yeah.
and he's like, listen, you're out.
But
he
I guess
just
my
loads
point.
him into a plane. Like what Tom Homan is doing is exactly, I mean, we talked about this. It's exactly what people want. Our country has hungered for this sort of leadership and no nonsense.
For so long, we've been told it has to go through this committee, this process. Oh, well, they got stopped because of this. And, oh, they got a Soros prosecutor. For so long, Americans have been in a mindset of like, well, it's not possible. Nothing's possible.
Like, what I wonder is, like, if this guy doing the sex crimes, the illegal alien doing the sex crimes, who apparently has a ton of time to watch Dr. Phil on television.
Yeah, he's like, hey, man, I never miss a
so
Thursday.
he might not be gainfully employed, but who knows? But, like, if he doesn't reach the threshold of, like, people that would be deported by Democrats.
Right.
Like, who are the Democrats deporting? No one?
This is my point.
No one.
This is my point. I think the answer is no one. But my point is, like, your run-of-the-mill average sex offender, I'd like to think we still take care of that relatively quickly.
Yeah, I would hope no sex offenders under the radar.
But the fact that this guy is an illegal immigrant complicated it in a democratic... This is the progressive prism that they live in. Mm-hmm. The fact that he's a sex predator upon children has complicated this guy's imprisonment for them. They're like, now how do we handle it?
I saw, Bill Melugin had a ride-along where ICE was just kicking in doors and rounding up all these people. Like, you were hearing stories of, like, this person attacked children 17 times and is still in the country because Chicago's been set as a sanctuary city. Like, Democrats have done a horrible thing where they make the victims feel like the perpetrators, where they're like, no, you don't understand. This guy came here illegally, committed a crime right there, and has committed 17 crimes, at least that we know about since then. He's the guy we should feel bad for. It's gotten so twisted.
The fact
Americans
that
are
there's
sick of it.
controversy. The fact that this is something that we're like, whoa, I can't believe they're doing
And I think
this.
that's the thing is we finally figured out if we want to take our country back, if we want this country to work, if we want it to be safe for our families, you just stop listening to the nut jobs.
Just
it's over.
put the blinders
They
on.
had their time to do their nuttiness, and we all figured out it just made the country far worse. Don't even listen to them.
So there's a handful of these illegal immigrants that think that they can like protest their way out of this situation. Right, which I do find completely hilarious. They're like, well, maybe if we make enough noise, picket signs and whatnot, they won't come for us. Well, we'll see about that. Clip 2, please. For our audio-only listener, what you're looking at is a crowd of people with Mexican flags protesting ICE enforcement efforts in Dallas, Texas. I don't know what they're hoping to have happen here. Probably the luckiest people in show business that it was week 1 and they had the Chicago enforcement division working and not Dallas.
Right.
I mean, this seems like a prime opportunity. Tom Homan right now is watching that tape, memorizing faces, hoping on a plane to Dallas.
It's also weird, like, I don't know, I'm not their PR rep or anything. Maybe they need to get in contact with George Soros or whoever's funding this protest. But, like, would it hurt you to throw in a couple American flags?
Yeah, they don't even try.
Just pretend.
Now they're like, no, it's Mexico. That's what we're doing here in Dallas. Yeah, it really is. That's what the point it's gotten.
Bad optics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you consider the same funders of all these operations had like, straight Palestinian headdresses immediately after October 7. Like, I'm not sure that political sensibility is top of the list of things that they've got going on. But anyway. All right, so we got to make acknowledgement. So several weeks ago, after the Hunter Biden pardon, we had a contest. Some of you may have forgotten about this. We didn't here at the Variety Program. Least of all, Wolf and Spaghettis, who follow this stuff very, very closely. Our contest at the time, after Hunter Biden, was what is the number of pardons that Biden's going to get up to? And he was at like 400. And we thought that was just completely outrageous, because it included his family, like all kinds of different stuff. And we're like, I don't know, like 1,000? Like, I mean, who knows? But
little did we know.
So we asked all of you, what's the number that you think that he can get to on the pardons? We had a ton of responses on this, some with great specificity. As it turns out, Axios reported there was 4,200.
Wow.
On the button.
Big number.
4,200. Well, guess what? Massey's Austin, Texas, in that moment, when there were only 404, number predicted 4,200 on the button.
Dead on.
What a legend.
Oh, so I mean, we said there's $100 of merch in it for you, and you're gonna get that. You gotta email us at hello@ruthlesspodcast.com. We'll do some verification to make sure you're the right person. But hats off.
Yeah, Massey's Austin TX nailed it.
Nailed
4,200 right on it.
Nailed it. What an incredible guess. I mean, look, that's why we throw these things out there. These people are
Our
smart.
folks know.
They're smart.
I feel like he's got to play the lotto.
Yeah, right. After that,
He's got a hot hand.
Seriously, we asked a question last Thursday, which was at the sort of back end of a week full of executive orders. And we said, like, if you're president or, if you can just chime in, what executive order would you like to see next? And again, fantastic comments. Love every single one of them. You got to like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Remember, you got to do this. Like, take this seriously. Stop for a minute. Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
If you got to put the bell on while you're at it, get all that stuff out of the way so your stuff can be read here, because you don't want anything else other than the voice reading your voice here in the Variety Program.
right.
And that's where we start, sir.
Okay, this first one comes from Bnai Yisrael. And he writes, longtime listener, first time opining.
Nice.
I've got an idea that fits perfectly with Trump's common sense approach to governing. Let's make all federal benefit programs exclusive to full U.S. citizens.
that makes sense.
States that don't comply will lose their federal support. I find it appalling that people can come here and jump into the U.S. safety net before contributing in a meaningful way to our country. By cutting off the benefits that bring people in and keep them here, mass deportation will happen voluntarily without costing taxpayers a dime. We are under no obligation to provide a safety net for the entire
Gosh,
world.
it's just
Makes
well
sense to me.
said.
Nice.
Well
Yes,
said.
right.
That is entirely
Very
right.
smart.
And I think they're going about the business of doing that, to be honest.
Seems
Needs to
like
be
it.
done.
In contrast to the 2020 Democratic primary, when all the hands were up
Yeah.
about free health care and Social Security and everything else.
Yep.
That's really what that's still their position.
Mm-hmm.
That's still a Democrat. They just don't want to talk about
They
it.
don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, that is what it is. All right, Dunks, what do we got?
This one's from Mad Maduro. Proposed executive order. Given recent developments with regard to bringing nuclear facilities online to meet America's growing energy needs and to further encourage the development of modular nuclear and other technologies necessary to effectuate the new golden age of America. The construction, development, and operation of the Yucca Mountain nuclear waste repository. Furthermore, pursuant to 40 U.S.C. Section 3102, this facility shall now be called the Biden-Obama Luminous Fun Time Radioactive Latrine.
That is some good research.
Yeah, must be some sort of lawyer. He did some lawyerings in there.
There was lawyer and there was code talk.
Yeah.
I
Wow,
love it.
I love it.
That's great stuff. All right, Smuggles, what do we got?
Comment 3 is from Ty B, and they write, Serious EO. Large cities and metropolitan areas must have roadways and infrastructure audited for quality and safety 2 years. Failed audit results in all federal government funding suspended until audit is passed. Yeah, that's
Love it.
unserious executive order. Passengers and luggage must be weighed when checking in a bag for a flight and charged according to total weight. That's not a bad idea.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You get a handle on the fats in the process.
It says PGA Tour. I like this. PGA Tour must implement a shot clock, shorts, and side betting during rounds. Golf balls shall not exceed $24 per dozen.
Ty, if you're interested in some kind of a job within the administration, I feel like this is a gentleman
You get a
who
lot of support
understands
from these
this
folks.
all the way through. You're talking about doing something about the fats, improving your visual Sunday afternoon quality of PGA consumption
And side betting.
and then is side betting to like amp up a little adrenaline, a little dopamine in the process, and at the end capping golf ball prices.
Bring them down.
Yeah, I love all of it. I need to know before that unserious EO about the passengers and luggage being weighed. I would like to buy whoever, the stock of whoever makes those drugs. The what's it called? Ozempic.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Before we do the fat tax.
Yeah, before the EO fat tax
Yeah.
comes into effect, you got to buy as much stock in Ozempic as possible.
Yeah, it's a transport fat tax. It's not just you're not just taxed because you're fat.
And
you're taxed if you're fat and you're fly.
A shot clock would be awesome, and the side bets. If you could side bet in PGA Tour,
Yeah, it'd be good.
I'd watch all of it.
It would be good.
How would you do the fat tax? Do you just like have a scale right there at the head of the jetway and you
I think
weigh
the same
and
way as when you're
charged
checking
on
in
the
luggage.
spot?
Instead of just putting the bag up there, they say, okay,
You
now
stand
you
on
hop
it
up.
too. And now, like, look, you could do something like, you know how the NFL has got the blue tent around the injury?
Yeah.
So to
Nah.
protect the medical
Let people
privacy.
have some dignity.
They
You
should-
could get
no,
them in
no,
a
no,
blue
they shouldn't
tent.
have that. Shouldn't
You don't
have
want that.
Nope.
Nope.
Well, maybe if you
Out
have
in the open.
maybe if
Bring
you have
back
enough
shame.
Should
sky,
be like cattle, is
Bring
what you're
back
saying.
shame.
if you have enough
Yeah.
sky miles, maybe you can avoid the blue tent. That's sort of like along
Oh.
with the diamond medallion.
Oh, there's
package.
a spending incentive
Wow.
that could maybe get you around the fat tax.
It's a capitalist society.
I don't even feel like you'd need more infrastructure. Like you could actually just weigh the bag like you would normally weigh it, and then when you go through TSA, they already see all your business.
Yeah.
You get into that machine and it scans you. All they have to do is be able to put a little weight at the bottom of that thing, then it weighs you.
Yeah.
And then when you collect your belongings, you find out how much more you owe.
and you know there are some dudes out there who are so happy that they're 3 bills plus. They would just be like, "Yes, watch this. I'm going to stand on the scale and
for a
I'm
high
going to,"
score.
and they're just going to pull out the
high
cash.
score. High score. It's an interesting concept. It may improve flight travel. I've always wondered, have you guys been on those planes where you sit down and somebody that sat there previously has got the extender?
No.
Oh, the belt extender?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Have you ever seen one of these things?
I have seen it.
These are things that flummoxed me. So basically, it's like the massive seatbelt that they have for you in a regular coach seat is not enough. And so they have a full extender that plugs in on both sides that you could literally just be Andre the Giant and get this thing around you. And I've always wondered, like, before you commission that set of belts, like it doesn't concern you at all. Like you're in the weight monitoring business at some level, and like that's never been a part of the calculus as to whether this plane can fly.
Boy, the
Like,
stuff
what if-
happening back in coach sounds terrifying, dude.
Like, is there a thing?
Smug.
it's really happening?
But is there a thing like they only have 5? If you get over like 5 extenders, then you're gonna have
They
to
can
start.
keep adding extenders?
No. I mean, like,
How many extenders are in use on one airplane before that thing's going to be overweight?
yeah. It's like because I mean, if you're 52, you've all been on those flights where you're like 52 pounds for your checked luggage, and they're like,
Right.
well, you got to take something out, and then you got this whole thing that's happening with people moving stuff from bag to bag to try to get under, but they don't do that for the person, right?
Yeah.
So like you get this like 89-pound gal who rolls up with a bag that's 51 pounds, and they put her through hell and gone. Meanwhile, you got like a 700-pound hippo that walks up and checks a 35-pound bag. No problem
Well,
at all.
I would let.
It's very good point.
I think we put it out to the community. I know that there's multiple pilots who listen to this show.
Yeah,
and I
tons.
hope they
We have a
reach out
lot.
and let us know. I think as the plane gets bigger for commercial travel, it's less of a concern.
Yeah.
When you get beyond the Cessnas and whatnot.
Sure.
And most of the planes, I think, are pretty overpowered. As is for some of the short domestic flights. But I'd be curious on some of like the long haul ones. Where people are taking lots of
You
like.
get a couple of 600-pounders. I mean, it feels like maybe
maybe.
might dip a wing or something. I don't know.
Hope not.
Jeez, I don't know. Anyway, it's worth looking into. Thanks for the suggestion, Ty B. Listen, if you're a fan of this variety program, you know that we were very early on into how JD Vance just totally dismantles an opposition. And he was caricatured by the left when he was first named by Donald Trump as something like weird or like incapable of, like somehow he wasn't qualified for it. And then like those of us who actually watched and didn't read and knew him from before were like, man, this guy's going to do a lot of damage, and these guys are going to underestimate the hell out of him. Then came the debate. Everybody like was aware of that. Well, it hadn't stopped.
Yeah.
And at some level, I'm surprised that anchors still have one-on-ones if they're going to take an adversarial position. Because like what he does to these people is remarkable. Mm. It's must-see TV. Next up in the cage was Margaret Brennan at CBS on Sunday. Can we play a clip? Let's play a clip to start this, please. Clip 3, if you don't mind.
Well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country founded by...
country.
This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants and some settlers. But just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world.
Yeah. We also mentioned this on the show last week as well, right? It's like, for far too long, our immigration policy has been determined by like this sort of glib shorthand of
bumper
America.
stickery.
Yeah, America was founded by immigrants.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a poem on the base of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
So our hands are tied. We can't change anything. And it's like, that's not the way the world works.
And for 20 years, every Republican's talking point was, well, we are a nation of immigrants, but we're also a nation of laws. You know, like,
that was it.
And it's just like nothing but pocket protectors. And JD Vance, in one interview, I mean, like, God love him. He's been doing it for months and months and months. But in one interview, completely dismantled that talking point. And any Republicans need to ever apologize for anything. You shouldn't have a stupid immigration policy.
And you'd have thought she'd have learned from the debate.
Right.
When she had already tried coming at JD when he was having his debate and he was demolishing Tim Walz. And she kept trying to cut him off and being like, no, actually, that app, yes, it existed in 1992.
The CBP app.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad
Get
you
outta
brought
here.
that out up, Smug, because I noticed there were a couple of people online who were kind of criticizing the decision to go into this interview with Margaret Brennan and CBS. You know, because to them,
why would you give them airtime?
Why would you give these people airtime, especially when they treated you so horribly at the debate? It's like, don't underestimate JD Vance. Like, they know what they're doing.
It's also the best way to win.
Because it's a fair fight now.
Yeah.
Like, when you're in a debate and you're up there and they can cut your mic and they can talk over you and they can frame up your answer around the next question they ask, that ain't a fair fight. The moderator's actually in a stronger position. But one-on-one, JD Vance was going to be fine.
And also, I'd just say this, it goes forward, because you're going to see some of this out of Trump. You're going to see this out of Trump administration officials, and you're like, why are they talking to these people who are just trying to sabotage all of their efforts? It's a good question. You look at it and you're like, you got to just ignore all of this stuff. But like, ultimately, they have the better set of arguments here. One that the majority of the American people have actually bought into. But you have to remember that for a lot of the center left in this country, I'm not talking about the progressive left, which is just like an untouchable absurdity. But a lot of the center left, they just don't have access to information whatsoever. They pick up the New York Times, they pick up the Washington Post, they watch CBS Evening News. They think that's the reality. It's not that they're done seeking information. It's just that the only information that ever comes is like this slanted far left nonsense.
Right.
So when you put JD on with Margaret Brennan in a show that you're already watching on Sunday morning, and he just completely dismantles every single one of her arguments, I bet that there are some number of people who like voted for Joe Biden twice, probably thought JD was like still a crazy person, who was like, oh.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Completely unconflicted about the fact pattern, and he is not going to take it. And I think that that's a reason why so many people are attracted to what Trump and JD Vance are doing. I mean, just look at the state of Nevada. Full of immigrants, okay?
Yeah.
And what we learned yesterday is that the state of Nevada now has more Republicans than Democrats. First time in 20 years. And a lot of credit on that goes to President Trump, J.D. Vance, Governor Joe Lombardo. But I think that people are really catching on to this style because they're like, finally, leadership in America.
Somebody's saying something that's real and resonates rather than like dancing behind talking points and trying to pretend they care about something they don't.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it was beautiful. Let's one more clip on this, if you don't mind. Clip 4.
Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals
but there are
have been properly
30,000
vetted.
people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary
Do you stand by
concern
it?
as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that
So
we
no.
know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These people
it's
are
not
vetted.
good.
These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted, and because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
It's just unbelievable.
I don't really care, Margaret, is now a new thing.
It's so good.
Excuse me, point of order. We're not clear exactly when he was radicalized, and somehow that makes it okay and
Why
you
would it be
wrong.
different?
Like, what the fuck?
Well, no, but why would it be different?
Yeah.
I mean, what's so amazing for people like Johnny appreciates this instinctively is for those of us who've done this for 20 years and you kind of like watch the way, you know the way that they're going to handle it. But she's handling it in like a mid-2000s way.
Right.
Right? Where she's challenging the assumptions that are made without the logic attracting
It's all just
itself
semantics.
to her
That's
point,
the
of,
thing.
point of view.
There's no thinking behind it because she's not trying to make a point. She's just trying to be a problem and
But-
disrupt. Like,
right, 'cause-
what's your point you're making here, Margaret? Like, what are you trying to say?
Because if she was right and he was radicalized later when he was here, well, all the more reason to do a little bit more vetting and not trust the homework that the Biden administration did on all of these migrants. Right? Like, if she's right, she proves his point. If she's not right, he's still also right. Her point makes no fucking sense.
One of the best memes I saw on Sunday immediately after the interview was this picture that somebody put of JD Vance in like a suit and a tie, and he's like, "Frankly, Margaret, I don't give a damn."
That's great.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Well, anyway, keep up the good work, JD, and your entire staff. Just I like roll it out every Sunday for all I care. I would love to keep seeing those clips. All right, so economic news. It's a little bit of variety. We'll classify it as variety because it's not like our core bread and butter. But we talked about this last week. Very quickly, everything we talked about in terms of AI, the importance of President Trump's announcement to the world that there is a significant import in this country for developing American AI versus foreign adversaries. 6 days later becomes a critical discussion when it comes out that Deepseek, which is a China-based AI, open AI product, comes out. Now, this is according to Fortune. Mark Andreessen, a friend of the program, friend of yours, Smug, warns the Chinese chat GPT rival Deepseek is AI's Sputnik moment.
Yep.
All right, so let me just... The markets reacted horribly from a domestic standpoint. Everybody sort of freaked out about this. You saw some big tech giants lose huge market cap over this announcement, and everybody's sort of wondering, like, what's up with that? Let's get your take, Smug, and go from there.
Sure, a couple things. First, I'd say I think Mark makes the most cogent point, and I think the best way for folks to think about this. I know when, you start hearing the buzzword AI in the news, it's hard to conceptualize what they're even talking about. For most folks, you say AI, they think it's just like a Google on steroids. But when Mark says that this is AI Sputnik moment, he's referring for our younger folks who don't know or who attended public school.
Oh, boy.
Sputnik
you know
was,
what? I'm to take immediate offense.
Sputnik was a satellite that the Russians put up. And the effect that it had on America is it put a fire under America's butt, and we won the space race. It became, every American realized they could see, at night, in the night sky, you see a satellite fly over, you know it's the Russians.
A constant reminder that we might not be number one anymore.
That's the thing.
And that is the thing, is it's stuck in the psyche of every American until we won that space race.
That's why that choice of words is so important.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good way for folks to conceptualize what this exactly means. There's a lot of discussion when it comes more specifically to DeepSeek of, okay, it was done so cheaply. The number that's being thrown around is $5-6 million. That also, if you want to get to nuts and bolts, there was already an existing model that a Chinese hedge fund was using, and they used, the leader of the hedge fund used profits towards expanding their computer model to do general knowledge, AGI, instead of just, pick me a stock that goes up. I think the main takeaway here when you talk about why did so many tech companies lose such value is a lot of investors were like, okay, we've been being told that, by Google and Facebook, these companies are spending billions and billions of dollars on NVIDIA chips and that's needed to build a large language model that can power one of these AIs. And investors were like, well, if this model China did for $5-6 million, then what's all this expenditure
They're wondering
for?
what the cost of the overhead is that they've been financing.
And so, I think if I had to say that was just like a single day freak out.
Yeah.
It's not like all of a sudden we realize that China has won, the world is over, and the markets are toast. I think what the takeaway from this should be is it's not like America's got this massive lead over China, and we don't need to think about this. And when you saw those folks visit the White House and we hear President Trump speak about AI, it's because it's incredibly important. It's because this is like the race for the atom bomb right now, because the amount of impact it will have on society and productivity. The first country to capture this technology, harness this technology, is going to have such a lead on the rest of the world. We're talking about it is going to cut poverty in half. You look at projections of what this does for productivity in this country, what would happen to the American economy would be like on rocket fuel.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, the fellas we were discussing this prior to coming on air. And look, I think one of the reasons why we put it in last week's show about the AI announcement by President Trump was because Democratic leadership in Washington had basically limited your knowledge of AI to like any sort of what they saw as a derogatory image of a politician they loved that they didn't want you to see. And they talked about deep fakes and AI and like all of that. And they were like, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. Right? Which is not what it is. Like that's like literally it's literally Google or paint by numbers. I mean, it's like the easiest thing. It's nothing to do with what the basis of AI is. And the lack of understanding by most Americans have contributed to this culture of wariness about what AI means. And we said last week, and I mean it, like this is the new frontier. Mm-hmm. This is the next generation of not warfare so much as information warfare that America just simply has to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if I could put it in perspective here, we've been talking a lot about Panama, the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump wants to get it back. Well, one of the reasons why he wants to get it back is because the Chinese, through their Belt and Road Initiative, are doing a bunch of infrastructure around the Panama Canal. The Panama government basically, signed deals with China to do that. Well, this is the digital version of that. China is building an open source AI model in order to give it to the rest of the world. And we don't want to lose this fight for who's going to control the future of AI because all these other countries decide to go with China's model rather than ours.
And let me tell you why that makes it. You're like, oh, China versus the United States, oh, whatever. So whatever you think of China, maybe you're just agnostic to China. Like, if they're doing it better, let them do it. There is the economic piece, which is critically important to our domestic economy and all of that, which is something you should concern yourself with. But there's also a value cylinder here and a national security cylinder. And in the value cylinder, it is absolutely opaque. And then ultimately, all of the algorithms that are run on these open source AI information chambers, where they're ingesting every piece of information around the world and spitting out, an answer, basically, to the question, those have assumptions built into them. In the United States, for however critical, self-critical you can be of your own country, has a basic democratic value system that allows things like our First Amendment. Mm-hmm. it has like basic human protection, human rights and liberties built into it, or else you'd get into a lot of trouble producing it domestically. That's why, like, a lot of our companies, whether it's Meta or Google or whatever, they're ultimately accountable to the people of the United States because they do business here. They're headquartered here. They have to operate within the confines of the Bill of Rights. They don't have to do that in China. Not only do they not have to do it, it's they see it as a net advantage where they can push an agenda. So you worry about things like TikTok. Reason that's thoughtful criticism is because they don't have these kind of things, and they can serve up algorithms that in the most nefarious purposes could be just trying to indoctrinate a new generation of Americans to a point of view they don't share here in the Western world. But if you take that to an AI standpoint, you're talking about changing the world.
Right.
And that is very much akin to a Cold War footing, an arms race. The only difference is that we're talking about an information arms race where ultimately our government has to accept the payload. And we don't have to accept the payload. We don't have to do it. We can do things like the president did last week, which is announce their firm support for the development of American AI. We're like firmly in this race. And I think ultimately the United States will win because our Western allies understand that like China's not in it for them.
Right. And and the information that they provide to the rest of the world is always a little bit or a lot wrong, right? Like in America, you have to be transparent about what you're spending. You have to be transparent about what you're doing. And so to get to one of the points I think you were making, Smug, is like the idea that they only spent $6 million to develop this is probably wrong.
Yeah.
Like there's
a lot of questions brought up in the development of it, but I think a really important thing that also makes it, I guess, more relatable and understandable to folks is they are essentially attempting the model that China has gotten so successful at. Because, if you open your phone, you see on your Google search, it says now powered by AI, and on Facebook, and even grocery shopping now, if you use the app, it says like, okay, we're using AI to determine your
It'll help you write your emails.
So the back end of that is typically they're licensing it from like OpenAI, or Google's got Gemini, their own model, or Facebook's got Llama, their own model. But what this company has been doing, Deepseek, is they beat all their competitors on price. In China, they put a bunch of them out of business by being like, we're offering it at like pennies on the dollar to offer that back end, their AI, to do the decision making for other companies, like their local Amazon, to be able to have their back end AI. We'll just use Deepseek's. We'll charge you 10 cents compared to $1 that the other guy is charging. And the president of China, she was very pleased to see this and has been meeting very frequently with the founder of this company, the hedge fund manager of this company. So,
well, he should. He's got a huge stake in it.
That's
Turns
the thing.
out that every single thing is wired through the CCP.
So
and
if they
it's
can
not
run
hard to
back
beat you on price when you have an entire state actor
That's the thing.
as a business partner.
If they want to run that same model back and just flood the world with a cheap Chinese good to make the market completely theirs.
And there's no coincidence that all of this rolled out 6 days after the president of the United States, for the first time in American history, made a definitive statement about our intent to develop American AI beyond the likes of which the world could understand. We did that for the first time. I mean, Joe Biden, even if he had that event lined up, couldn't have pulled it off. You know what I mean? Like what do you...
You imagine what his little note card would have to say for him to be able to describe what AI is?
Yeah, couldn't have. So, however this made its way to market, whether it was through a Goldman analyst or whatever, like the intent was very, very clear in that China was like, no, we're here too. We can do it cheaper. Tank the stock prices of a whole bunch of people who were investing in AI and told, I think for obvious reasons, all of their shareholders that they were making this baseline investment in things that, maybe it's not as expensive as we were led to believe. I think all of that shit's bullshit. The important part that you need to take away from it is like, this isn't something to be fearful about because we get it.
That's the thing.
You got Sachs inside. You got Elon inside. You got guys like Mark Andreessen who are very plugged in, who are talking about this. Zuckerberg has been working on this. If you want to know what's going to happen to the world, listen to what that guy says 2 years ahead of time, because he is like a 10 of 10 in terms of predicting the future. Like, we're good shape. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of whether or not you can sort of coalesce marketplaces to understand the new reality that this president is going to protect the American consumer, and he's going to allow us to innovate things like energy.
That's the thing. Is I think another important takeaway from this is, especially under Biden, the tech community was treated as like they're criminals, like antagonists. Like, what can we do to try to like wrap these people up? They were debanking a bunch of people. They were putting in regulations, and it's very easy for folks to understand of the energy regulations the Biden administration had crippled American domestic energy production, and that was a choice that they made, and they want to do that. If we take the exact opposite tack, because the AI industry needs a lot of energy to run all these models, all these computers working together, it takes a lot of energy. Just deregulate. Let American energy be tapped.
If it takes a lot of energy and you have more domestic energy than anywhere else in the world, isn't that an advantage?
That's an advantage.
So maybe maybe turn that switch on.
That's the thing. Let our country have a chance.
It's just incredible to me. If you think about the way the President Biden, even before President Biden, but the Democrats in Congress, in a liberal worldview domestically, is that they spent the last 8 years talking about things like, how do we curb speech that we disagree with? Mm-hmm. You're limiting the power of the future to like being concerned about words that hurt your feelings.
And that was
in contrast. You're now dealing with an administration that's like, no, we're all in on the next thing that's going to make the 2025 internet seem like a Model T.
I was seeing a lot of AI researchers and computer scientists discussing this as they were fiddling with Deepseek, the Chinese AI. Is they're like, what's really fascinating to me is there's no like specific, except for like Tiananmen Square and things like that, there's not like speech sensitivity guardrails.
Yeah.
And
well, how could you if your whole goal is to open source all information to provide answers?
And that, like, so many AI companies in the U.S. have, during the Biden regime, had to deal with, okay, if we don't have the model say, this line on the current thing of whether trans rights or humanist or whatever.
Incorporate DEI.
Yeah, or incorporate DEI, then there's going to be hell to pay.
Yeah.
Like, for so long, tech companies have had to live afraid of what the Biden administration would do. And now the Trump administration is the exact opposite. He said, he wants a golden age. The golden age has begun. They're going to let America just flourish.
Listen, I think it's a real opportunity. I'm not scared about this at all. I feel like we've got the best innovators anywhere on the planet.
I mean, could you pick a better time to have a guy like Elon Musk, who literally started a company that catches rockets out of the air?
Yeah.
Like inside our government?
Yeah. Well, like just Jamie Dimon said, he's our Einstein.
Yeah.
Like this is we're watching our Einstein.
I like our odds.
Work. I like our odds. And you got Zuck and everybody. Like, look, I feel good about that.
Yeah.
I feel good about that. So I have no fear about all of it. A little bit of a recap here in the variety section. The football situation, it's not exactly what the variety program wanted to see in the Super Bowl. I understand we got a lot of Philly fans. I got a lot of them in my house, unfortunately. They're very happy. Nearly like burned down their city. Can we play clip 5 here, Spaghettis?
Oh, Jesus. I believe that was a gun. Dude, that was definitely a gun. Oh, get us in the camera.
So this is a party post-victory over the Washington Commanders where clearly visible if you're a YouTube watcher is a gentleman pulling out what looks like a Glock, some kind of a 9mm, and firing 3 shots directly into the air, like we're in Kabul.
And the reaction was, I think he shot a gun. All right, well, get me in the camera.
and then go birds. And then go birds. Like, I got to tell you, fellas, those bullets are coming down somewhere.
That's the thing.
Yeah. They don't erase in the atmosphere.
I mean, I could not be. I mean, I know our next guest is happy that the Chiefs are there, but I'm so sick of the Chiefs. I'm so sick of the Chiefs. I'm done with them.
I know it. But, it's just like it is what it is. We just have to deal with it. Another year of disappointment for the fellas.
That's right.
Another year. Well, next year it's going to be all purple.
Yeah.
All purple with
Yeah.
the Vikings.
I don't know.
No, I don't even.
Don't get your hopes
I
up.
can't even say it with a straight face. But we do have a great guest, and this guy, you're going to want to pay attention to each and every sentence that comes out of his mouth, because your future, my future, the American economy's future, probably the global economy's future, relies on everything this guy has to say. Jason Smith. Well, this is an interview that we've been eagerly anticipating. Someone we follow very, very closely. I think you can make an argument, one of the top 5 most important people on the globe right now.
Yeah.
When you consider what his responsibilities are. The Ways and Means Chairman, Jason Smith. How are you, sir?
It's great to be with you.
This is fantastic. You're here in studio.
I mean, there's no better place to be in Washington, D.C. So
We're going to get down to business, and we'll talk about tax reform and all the incredible things that you're responsible for here over the next year. But, let's get to know you a little bit.
oh boy.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think in many ways the change in the Republican Party itself is reflected upon your chairmanship in many ways. And that you're a working class guy from the center of this country, the kind of people that put President Trump in office, not typically who, historians think of as somebody who's like running the largest, most significant tax writing committee in history. But your colleagues chose you to do it. And the Speaker has great faith in you to do it. And you've been executing upon this for 2 years. You now have all the responsibility of it. I mean, am I right about that?
We're busy. Yeah.
But don't you think, the constituency, you sort of reflect back an awful lot of what the change in the Republican Party is.
So it's very interesting. I revert back to 2 years ago when I was wanting to become the Ways and Means Chairman. The very first slide that I presented to the House Steering Committee when I was giving my pitch was a slide that said the Republican Party is the party of the working class. And that we needed to make sure that the policies in the Ways and Means Committee address who we represent. And those are small business owners, farmers, working class families. I grew up in my congressional district. I'm 7th generation in my district. And grew up in a very working class family. My dad was a preacher and an auto mechanic. My mother was a factory worker. I lived most of my life in a single wide trailer, and then we upgraded to a double wide.
Those were heady days.
They were heady days. But, the farm that I live on, I purchased my first year in law school when my granddad died because him and his brothers didn't want to keep the property, and I wanted to keep it in the family. And so I literally bought the farm by convincing a local banker before Dodd-Frank was in existence that if you loan me enough money while I'm a first-year law student with zero income, I will sell enough timber off the property every year to make the payments until I graduate law school and become gainfully employed.
It was like all on spec.
It was
like, I
all
convinced that I
there.
could do this.
And I couldn't do it today under Dodd-Frank, but I was able to keep our family farm 20 years ago. And so that's home. I raise beef cattle, white buffalo. I have sheep, donkeys, all named after Democrats.
Amazing.
So it's where I go to get away, and there's nothing better than like building fence, cleaning brush, working cattle. Sometimes it's easier to be around the cattle than
almost all
some of the
time,
people
right?
in Washington.
Almost all the time. You can clear the mechanism out there, right? And also, I'm sure it gives you a ton of perspective when you're dealing with big tax code type things and how it impacts the American people when you're living out there.
It does. The district that I represent is the heart of working class Americans. It is the 9th poorest congressional district out of 435. Wow. It is also the 6th most conservative out of 435. And so by definition, the Republican Party is the party of the working class. I mean, our federal courthouse in Cape Girardeau, Missouri is called the Rush Limbaugh Federal Courthouse.
Yeah, right. I remember
so
that now.
Amazing.
We're pretty conservative. But it's so similar to Appalachia. We're the Ozark Hills. I always tell people, JD Vance may be a hillbilly from Appalachia. I'm a hillbilly from the Ozarks, which is very similar. And it's why my very first committee hearing that I held as chairman of Ways and Means wasn't in Washington. I did it in Petersburg, West Virginia, at a lumber yard. It was called State of America's Economy Appalachia. I wanted something very similar to the people who I represent in Missouri, and Appalachia is about as close as you can. And so we heard from, real working families, coal miners, small business owners. And I still believe that that's the best committee hearing we've had.
Oh, it's a hell of a way to start. It is reflective of the change in the Republican Party, no question. I mean, the working class coalition that came together last November gave you all the majority, gave President Trump the White House and the Senate. It's hard to argue with. I mean, we've definitely changed as a party. We're definitely representing that center of the country. I wonder, you had to have seen this transformation where you grew up, right? I mean, a lot of these rural places started out very blue, and then just sort of started trending, and then 2016 was a big line of demarcation in a lot of ways where they became very red. Yours may have been a little ahead of that in some ways, but were you into politics growing up? Did you watch all this stuff? Or, how much of the effect did that have?
So I wasn't. I was raised in a family where my dad's family were all Republicans and my mom's was all Democrats.
Yeah.
Democrats as of a Southern Democrat style.
Yeah.
They're now all Republicans
now.
But they raised me to vote for the person. I thought I was a Democrat growing up. Until I started looking at the platforms, and I'm like, there's no way. This is terrible. And so that's what I think the majority of the people of Missouri has been. Missouri used to be a swing state.
Yeah, very much so.
Obama barely lost the state to McCain, if that tells you anything. And we usually went the direction of the winner. But it's not a swing state any longer. Our congressional district is the most red congressional district in the entire state, and it used to be the most blue.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's kind of what I'm talking about. That shift, unmistakable, state after state. I mean, it's not unique to Missouri. It may be higher margins in some ways, but that has been the case almost everywhere over the last 10 years, fellas.
Well, I think, number one, that is critical, is for so long, and I think part of the reason the Trump movement took off so much is it was almost like the forgotten man in America, the silent majority, folks who felt that they were left behind. But when you have elected officials such as yourself, who are representative of that group, of the working class, seeing folks like that speaking for them draws them into the process of wanting to get out and vote, of wanting to be a part of this, because they feel like one of us is now there. And that's critical, I think, especially to get things done, is because now it's not these people in Washington are telling me this information. It's, oh, we've sent one of our own to Washington. That must have been a tremendous resource for you to move the ball on this committee.
It's been super important to be able to just represent the people who I serve and who I represent in the Ways and Means tax issues. I've been very supportive of tax provisions that some people get a little nervous about, such as the child tax credit. But our vice president's very supportive of the child tax credit.
Some of that
so is the president.
Consumer-facing stuff.
Absolutely. The Republican Party created the child tax credit in 1996. It wasn't the Democrats. It was us. And so we need to own that. Yeah. We are the party of families.
Yeah, no question about that.
Let's encourage that.
Yeah. No, look, it's really well said. Johnny?
I got to tell you, I love your background. There are guys who come to Washington and they literally don't want to talk about their humble upbringing, if you can believe that. There are guys who grew up in a trailer and they won't tell anybody because they've spent so much time trying to be a part of the club. They want to forget about that past. And I think it's such a mistake in the fact that you say that right up front, and that informs who you are and what it is that you're doing, gives everybody a lot of confidence that you're going to continue to carry those concerns all the way into the Ways and Means Committee. Think about it. From a single wide trailer to the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, you could make a movie about that.
Only in America.
Yeah.
But anybody can do that. I tell people with a quality education and determination, the sky is the limit. My parents were the first to ever graduate high school. I was the first to graduate college in my family. my grandparents never even had running water on the farm that I own. I actually had to drill the well in law school to have the first running water. I literally, at Christmas or anytime I worked on the family farm, to wash my hands, I had to pump water outside in a cistern, and there was no indoor plumbing. And I didn't know that was so unusual, but I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful and proud how I was raised, and it makes me a better representative because there's people like that still in our congressional district. Oh, yeah. When people ask me, what's the proudest thing that you've been able to accomplish as chairman? We reauthorized Title 4B. It's a huge child welfare program in the Ways and Means Committee that was signed into law this year. And there was numerous provisions that help children who have been taken away from their families. But there's a provision in there that required that children cannot be taken away strictly on poverty. They shouldn't be taken away on poverty. Like, it's more important to keep that family intact than to put them in the system just because some people may think that they're being neglected when in fact they're not. It's just that they live in poverty.
Right, because family is actually wealth. And
that's right.
People in Washington, the elites, they may not see it that way.
Categorize
it may not look the same on a balance sheet, but family is wealth.
That's right.
And having people together is just, I mean, that's a great thing that you did.
You mentioned the child tax credit. I'm wondering if there's other examples you have, that impact, working families in your district that you'd like to see reflected in what we do next when it comes to tax reform. Obviously, President Trump's tax cuts were incredibly impactful for working families across this country.
And also just totally mischaracterized by the media.
Totally mischaracterized. Raised
else,
incomes by $5,000 for your average American family. The richest 1% in this country actually paid more in taxes as a result of Donald Trump's tax cuts that were supposed to be a giveaway to the rich, as the left said. So I'm curious, what are the other opportunities you think we have this time around?
I think one of the provisions that's expiring at the end of this year is the guarantee deduction. It gets slashed into half. And 97% of the people who I represent, that's how they used to file their taxes, is the guarantee deduction. If that gets slashed in half, that's a tax increase on every one of them. And these are working families. 91% of all Americans use the guarantee deduction. That's a big number. Only 9% of Americans use taxes where they itemize.
Yeah, you're itemizing, typically that's done with very sophisticated, usually pretty wealthy people who are itemizing large charitable giving and that kind of thing. For the rest of us, that's just it.
That's it. And so I like to point out that when you look at Trump's tax cuts in 2017, they tried to say it was for the wealthy and it didn't help the working class or the poor. Let me just tell you a fact. A family of four who make $60,000 or less, they paid zero in federal taxes under Trump tax cuts. My average median income in our congressional districts right in the low 40s. So that deeply affected the people who I represent by doubling the child tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000, doubling the guaranteed deduction. Those provisions alone really, really affect working class families.
Yeah, no question. Well, as long as we're talking tax reform, we might as well get into the meat of this. Look, in this town, you do a great job of talking about the impact that this has on the end user, the taxpayer. But you also are chairman of the most prestigious committee in the House of Representatives, where there's a cottage industry, literally larger than a cottage, that is just constantly talking about process and talking about, how are you going to go about doing these things? And it's just like one bill or two bills or whatever. I've heard you talk about your preference for a one bill. I'm wondering if, when you're formulating your opinion on how we ought to do this, how much of that is because you understand the importance of getting the tax piece done in good time in 2025 to not only just assure Americans that their taxes aren't going up, but markets, the larger American economy, and somewhat the global economy?
One big, beautiful bill is exactly what we're pushing every moment, every day. Let me tell you, if we do not finish our job, we will face the highest tax increase in the history of our country under a Republican House, Republican Senate, and a Republican White House.
Can't have it.
And that cannot happen. Failure is not an option. I go to sleep thinking about tax policy. I think about tax policy while I'm sleeping. I think about it when I wake up. And so
it must be enjoyable night.
Oh, it's so enjoyable. That's probably why no one will date me. But,
I gotta say, it's better you lose sleep over than me.
Honey, I was just thinking of the marginal tax rates.
That's exactly what people want whenever you go to dinner. But it is so crucial that the decisions we make right now are the right decisions. And history tends to repeat itself all the time. And I said early on that the last time 2 reconciliation bills were ever signed into law in the same year was 1997, and I was wrong. 1997, we did pass 2 reconciliation bills, but it was on the same day and it was under the same reconciliation.
They bundled it.
They bundled it together. So the last time that 2 different budget resolutions and reconciliation bills were signed into law in the same year was 1986.
Oy.
And so I know the Republican House better than most. I've been here a while. I know my colleagues, and I'll tell you, it's a tough dynamic. To get one over the finish line is going to require all hands on deck.
And you're talking about razor thin margins here anyway. I mean, regardless of everybody's intent. I mean, you can't lose anybody.
In a few weeks, it will be 217 to 215.
It's wild.
Right now, we're at 218 to 215. If one person dies, that's troubling. And think about it. I hate to say this, but if you look at the average Congresses, there's typically 4 people that die every Congress.
Wow.
And so don't assume we will always have a majority. And besides that, look at 2017. If you talk to President Trump, one of the regrets that he may have had from TCJ was the fact we didn't do it soon enough.
Yeah.
We did healthcare first.
Yep.
And I would argue that we waited too long as well. We passed it. It came into law like the week of Christmas in 2017. And 10 and a half months later, we lost the House of Representatives.
Yeah. It didn't have a time to sort of set into the marketplace. People didn't understand what they were getting out of it.
The economic tailwinds was not making effect. There are 26 million small businesses right now that are making their decisions of how to invest, whether to hire new employees, what directions they're going to move their company. But they have the uncertainty of, will their tax rate be 43.4% or will it be 23.4% with the 199A small business deduction just going away?
I have a friend who said this to me in conversation about a week ago, that he has to place orders for goods that he's selling this year. He's got a small mom and pop shop in a strip mall. And he says, I don't know how to base these orders because I don't know if taxes are going up and my margins are gone. People are scared.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it goes to your point, Chairman. I mean, this is something that needs to be a no-doubter by the time you get to the end of this year. I mean, people are planning all the way through, and the earlier you can get it done, obviously the better economic impact.
One big, beautiful bill will...
He's on message. I love it.
It is the quickest, best approach to deliver as many wins that we can for the American people. It needs to have border. It needs to have energy. It needs to have spending cuts. It needs to have the tax cuts. Let's get this done. If we keep our head down, work together, stay united, we could have this done by Memorial Day. There's no question that we can. And we need to deliver that for the American people. They're counting on us. The reason why we have the White House, the House, and the Senate is because of President Trump. And President Trump campaigned on these priorities: securing the border, making us energy dominant, making sure permanency to his expiring tax provisions. And then
the economic security message was central and a great contrast with the Biden administration that presided over record inflation and the rest.
Americans are struggling. They've seen inflation go up 21% in the last 4 years. And so it's cost more to just put food on their table, clothes on their backs, or gasoline in their cars. They need relief and they need certainty. And that's what Congress can do if we stick together and work together. We have a smaller majority in the House of Representatives than the United States Senate has.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
usually the Senate is the problem.
Yeah.
The obstacle is going to be the House.
Yep.
We have 218 senators in the House of Representatives because one person can kill the bill.
Yeah, well, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. One of the things that sort of consternates us, maybe we're a little old school in this regard, but you hear out of some of your colleagues in the House that, all these tax cuts need to be paid for, right? Whereas if, our view largely is that you either believe in a smaller government or people keep their own money. It's not the government's money.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
No, that's exactly right. Nobody needs to tell you that people work very, very hard for what they earn. And what's wild to me is that you have a handful of Republicans. I won't name names because you've got to work with all these guys in a very small margin.
We love them all.
Yeah,
we love every one of them.
Right, the diplomat.
But all of a sudden you have a handful of Republicans who think that money that belongs to someone else is somehow their pay for, and now they want to raise taxes on small businesses. And so I wonder, do you feel like you can prevail upon those guys to sort of return to the conservative roots and want to let people keep more of what they earn, let the small businesses keep more of what they earn?
We have to. Last week, I presented to the House Republicans for the numerous time. I don't even know how many on the big, beautiful bill. But what I was trying to hit on there was the revenue.
Yeah, the revenue goes up.
Yeah, as Republicans, we always say that we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem in Washington. And if you look at the revenue to GDP for the last 50 years, it's right at 17%. Revenue right now is 17.1% in the most recent year. So we don't have a revenue problem. Where the spending has been typically for the last 50 years, it was around 20%. So we did spend more than revenue coming in. However, in the last 5 years, it's 26% to GDP.
Wow.
And so we know we know the amount of revenues that's coming in under this tax code. There is no reason why you would pay for just extending current tax policy because our revenues are enough. The only way you would pay for it or allow them to expire is if you believe we have a revenue problem.
That's right.
And that we need to increase taxes. And I haven't found a colleague that will say that we have a revenue problem. I've challenged them.
They'll talk a lot about pay-fors, but nobody will admit that.
That's absolutely the case. And so this is what we're working on, what we're navigating. I think that when you look at new tax cuts, that you need to consider that. Yeah, because that could affect the revenue that's coming in. But we know that this is current tax policy. We know what's working. We know how it's grown the economy. I mean, joint tax and CBO was so wrong.
Oh,
so
totally.
wrong on
Revenue
TCJA.
estimates? Yeah.
The revenue estimates,
because they're static.
Yeah, it's just like I get a little wound up when we start talking about joint tax and CBO.
Let's go put a quarter in his back.
Just like if you look at it, was projected that we would be at $1.5 trillion in deficit in revenues if we pass TCJA. In fact, if you look at the years from what their projections were to what they are now, we had 1.6 trillion above their projections. That's a $3 trillion miss.
And they're still going to score it the same way, though.
It just happened to be Republican tax policy. But if you look at the IRA, they scored it at $271 billion, and 6 and 8 months later, they scored it at $700 billion. I mean, how do you get it? But it was Democrat tax.
It's Democrats.
Right.
Well, it's
funny
right.
how that works.
Because and theirs is always, theirs is more static because it's just raising taxes.
They're going to give me terrible scores on everything now. But I'm just
no, but I mean, I think this is the point. Is if you look at this stuff, and I remember doing tax policy. And Johnny and I were out in the hall and several different tax reforms trying to convince reporters that, it turns out if you do things that are good for the economy and businesses and individuals react to it and increase GDP significantly, your revenue goes up as a result of that and the economy starts to boom. And pretty soon all of those static estimates that you have are meaningless because every time we've done it and the economy responds to it, and you end up with more revenue than they project.
You absolutely do. We have record revenues right now. We have record corporate tax receipts right now.
Think
with
about that.
A 21% tax rate instead of a 35% tax rate.
Maybe it's because corporations are interested in doing business now with a 20%.
They're investing, they're growing, and they're coming back. There has not been one inversion of a U.S. company since passage of TCJA. And when Obama was in office, there was 28 inversions.
Incredible.
It shows our tax policy worked. Trillions of dollars came back to the United States.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that's protected.
So let me just add, structurally, I assume most of this, as you're looking at it, is to ensure that we're protecting what we won in 2017 in terms of making sure those 2017 tax cuts don't expire and Americans don't have massive tax increases. And then obviously you heard the things on the campaign trail that the president talked about, no tax on tips and things like that are, additive. And as you said, those are kind of trade-offs that we're going to have to figure out how to incorporate. Clearly, you're going to do your level best to get as much in that, if not all of it in that, as you can. But this isn't like just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You basically are working off a product, correct?
I think it's pretty simple. The president made it clear on the campaign trail, make permanent my expiring tax provisions in TCJA, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. What we would have to do there, you can't touch Social Security and reconciliation, but we can still provide tax relief for seniors. Mm-hmm. There is numerous ways that we can use the code to help provide the tax relief that the president campaigned on. Also, he wants to lower tax rates for companies that produce and manufacture in the United States. Yeah. These are things that we have been researching for months now. I set up 10 different tax teams back in April, planning for a unified Republican last April. Planning for a Republican unified government, House, Senate, and White House. People thought I was crazy that, there's no way that Republicans could have all three. And our tax teams went to more than 20 states, did over 120 different meetings across this country with real small business owners, real big businesses, real working families, real farmers, and looked at the entire tax code. Just not what's expiring, but the entire tax code. Because we're going to be touching things that was not just in TCJA as well, because they need to be touched. We need to take away bad tax policy and replace it with good Republican tax policy that would fit great in a big, beautiful bill.
I like the sounds of that. I mean, look, I think core to what you're talking about certainly was the case with TCJA and what you were talking about with the president's promises on Social Security. A big piece of this, just the economic security piece. Clearly, seniors with inflation, a huge concern, but really everybody. I mean, how much do you look at the tax code as an opportunity, not just for like the short-term tax relief component, which is very, very important, but you're also incentivizing people to do like some financial planning here, make sure their retirement is taken care of. Like this is a piece that I don't think many people understand is a critical component to what it is that you guys do when you look at how to help your average American family.
Very critical. One of the big examples that jump to mind is the death tax. Mm-hmm. The death tax gets slashed in half if we do nothing. And it has a huge impact. I represent a very poor congressional district. Agriculture is the lifeblood of our area. And those family farms, it doesn't take much whenever you're land rich but cash poor to be over that exemption level as a farmer. And the worst thing you need is have a death in your family and you're going to have to take out a second mortgage on your farm ground just for Uncle Sam. Mm-hmm. Those are real things that affect real Americans. You just look at...
And you guys in 17, I think you took it all the way up to like 13 or...
It's right around 13 to 14,000 right now.
Which I guess, I mean... Well, at least if I'm
I
hearing
mean,
it right.
13, 14 million right now.
Yeah, right. So,
Uh-huh.
I mean, you're basically protecting your district at
Yes.
that point, right?
So you look at an average cotton farm is 1,500 acres. Farm ground in the Boot Hill of Missouri is about $10,000 an acre.
Mm-hmm.
And so 1,500 acres at 10,000, you're over the exemption.
Oh.
And that's not counting your equipment, like a cotton picker or a combine. These are real expenses, but that's the investments. And that's what they've continued to grow for that family for years. But they may have to pay 40+% tax upon death.
So, I mean, look, these are all kind of different categories of things. You get Trump's promises, you're building off 2017, and then, I feel for you on this, but you got the SALT crew that you got to deal with all the
We
time.
love the SALT crew.
I'm sure he does. Not a big issue in Missouri.
I think the average SALT deduction in Missouri is like $1,211.
Yeah, right. So, like, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about here, I mean, this is the state and local tax deduction. It applies to people who may very well be great red-blooded Americans, but they happen to live in very liberal states with huge tax implications, and so they get hit because they can't deduct their state and local taxes from their federal returns as they became accustomed to, so they would just continue to raise state and local taxes. This became an issue that was addressed in 2017, but we still have a majority that's built on a lot of folks from New York, California, places like that you're going to have to kind of deal with that.
In a razor-thin majority, we have to deal with everyone's
Every
issues.
single person.
And this is a significant issue for my colleagues from New York, California, and New Jersey.
Yeah.
And we've been working with them aggressively, and we gotta thread the needle. We gotta find a good compromise. The $10,000 SALT cap that was put in 2017 created about $800 billion considered for pay-for to help lower the individual rates for everyone, because every individual rate was lowered. That expires too. And so if we do not extend the Trump tax cuts, it'll be an unlimited cap on salt. So the people who hate salt will be giving the folks in New York and California, New Jersey, unlimited salt. And so it's super important that we all work together and find that good common ground that's in the middle. And we'll get there.
See, I like what
absolutely
he's
will get
doing
there.
there. I like what he's doing there.
No, it's just like this guy gets
it's like, look, if you don't work with me,
yeah, right. You could have
be really bad.
because I do have a point of view.
Yeah.
No, but
We
failure's
are
not.
working with everyone.
Yeah, failure's not an
Yeah.
option. To your point, I mean, this is not a time for rigid ideology when you're talking about thousands of dollars coming out of your average American's paycheck. I mean, this is about figuring out how to protect the American people that put you there in the first place.
It is. It's so important. There's 207 million taxpayers in the United States. 207 million. There's a lot more people than that, but 207 million taxpayers. On average, if we allow these tax cuts to just expire, they will face a 22% tax increase.
Wow.
And they've already faced a 21% inflation tax over the last 4 years. You talk about cratering the economy.
Yeah.
You talk about making sure that Republicans are never elected again.
Yep.
This is a great way to do it, is by not passing this bill. That's why I think about tax policy during the day, while I'm sleeping, and when I wake up. So,
in one big,
beautiful bill. So my roommate is Senator Mullen. He's my landlord.
Oh, yeah.
So I wake up making sure he hears one big, beautiful bill every day.
He's
about to put me in a headlock.
I've got one note. I've got one note on this. When you finally do all of this work and get everybody at the table, and you got the New Yorks and the Californias, and you fix the SALT thing, and no tax on tips, you get it back to the president, and you say, Mr. President, I got a surprise for you.
No surprises for the president.
You told me one big, beautiful bill. I have brought you the most beautiful. and just one up them, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's even better."
Give it some gold trim.
Yeah,
really emboss that thing.
Yeah,
the president loves to talk tax policy.
He does,
and you never know when he's just gonna call you on your cell phone, and you better answer. It's not good to miss it, but he really cares about delivering on these economic policies.
Yeah.
It's he, in regards to salt, he's like, Jason, fix it, figure it out, and that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna fix it. We're gonna thread that needle, and we're going to be able to create one very good, big, beautiful bill. So,
I got to ask you this before we go, because I think it's so hilarious. Having done this for 20 years and been a part of a lot of different tax debates, I always get a kick out of Democrats and the way that they approach these things. And it's anything the Republican does is always a tax cut for the rich, no matter what, right? And they're like, what we ought to do is raise taxes on the rich, and we ought to focus on them paying their fair share. It's like a broken record. It's been doing 20 years, same talking point, no alterations every single time. And then every time in practice, when they get into like what they would do, it's just increasing marginal individual rates and pass through LLCs. Right. As if any like ultra wealthy person, and I only bring this up because it's so rare that we get somebody who's like as steeped in the tax code as you are. You must get a kick.
It's because
it
makes you fall asleep. That's what it is.
So. But that's the thing that always kills me, is that they're always their answer to tax cuts or tax hikes on the rich is never actually anybody who's rich. It's always individual. Like,
that
how many
example.
How many W-2 earners do you know that are like the filthy rich?
Right.
Yeah. It just doesn't exist.
Well, this is the prime example. If you look at all the expiring provisions of TCJA, 70% are individual. 70% of all the expirations are individual. And of that 70%, 2/3 are focused on people who make less than $400,000 a year. That affects real Americans. And when I hear them talk about everyone pay their fair share, millionaires, billionaires pay their fair share, I always ask, what is the fair share? Is it 100% of what they make? Like what?
Meanwhile, the guys
like, yes, comrade,
they won't
it is.
answer it. But if you took all the money from
just
every billionaire in the United States, you would fund government for like 8 months. Like it's almost impossible.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're like, what is the rich? And the guys from New York are all hiding their people behind them. Like, I don't know. It's somebody else. Listen, I can't thank you enough for coming in and sharing and imparting some of this wisdom with us. Obviously, you are the man on the hot seat and delivering here for the whole country. And listen, we got a lot of faith and trust in what you guys are doing. Your team is terrific. Keep telling us what we need to know as we go along, because I think I heard you the other day say this is going to be really hard. And I agree. It's going to be really hard, but it is a no-fail operation.
Failure is not an option, but it is going to be the hardest thing that we do this Congress. And it's going to require all hands on deck, everyone working together until we get the votes and have it across the finish line. And we'll do it.
Yep. We'll get it done. Jason Smith, everybody.
I mean, he's just brilliant. And there is no better person to be in charge of writing this than someone from a poor district in the Midwest.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he said, like at the top. He's perfect. He's indicative of the change within the Republican Party and the way that he looks at economic incentives to represent this country. And I think we see that happening in the tax. So it's nice to see somebody, by the way, who has that sort of like Midwestern sensibility about them, that also understand that like the goal of the government is not to just get more revenue from American taxpayers. Right? I mean, you hear it. We talked about this a little bit with him, where it's like, oh, a new thing in the Republic. You got to pay for tax cuts. Okay, all right. So let me get this straight. What I want is to make sure that we never decrease the size of government. I just want to make sure that we have more funding for that operation, because that's what that is. Don't let any conservative ever tell you that that's not the debate. When they're like, well, I'm fiscally conservative, so I want you to pay for tax cuts. What that means is that they're very comfortable with the size and the scope of this government. They just want to make sure that they reduce the annual deficit by having you pay more to fund the liabilities that we have as this country. That's what that is. This guy gets that joke. and he's selling it. I think he's making forward progress on it. Don't you guys?
I mean, that's the thing is everything he said was common sense. He gets it. He knows what the stakes are. I think he gets the job done.
Well, yeah, and he has to have that sort of mentality because we got a razor-thin majority.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a lot of constituencies with divergent opinions on a lot of different component parts of this overall deal. But I think he's got the right personality to deliver on it.
Yeah, it seems like it.
You know?
Right? I mean, like, serious guy,
Yeah.
unquestionably, knows his stuff unquestionably, but is not, like, inherently a divisive figure
Right.
who's looking to pick fights with people. Like, he's taking input. He's trying to twist dials to reflect people's intentions because he's got to run the table. You know, it's like that old game of hearts where you need all the hearts at the end.
Yeah.
Like, he's got to shoot the moon on the thing.
That's right. He's got to do it.
But we got to have him shoot the moon because, as he said, failure is not an option.
That's right.
Great stuff here on the Variety program. You're not going to get this stuff anywhere else. You just don't get it.
Nope.
You know, you have a lot of grab-assery and everything
Yeah.
else, but like that's some stuff.
Yeah, but every once in a while, we let you look through the crystal ball of the future on things like AI or tax policy, and we're a serious program.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have smarts.
We're smart.
We have some smarts.
Not dumb.
Not dumb. Not like they say.
Not like they say.
Fellas, I think we did it.
I think so. Absolute banger of an episode. Gentlemen, again, thank you so much, Chairman Smith, for all that knowledge. I learned so much. And thank you, dear listener. Remember, like and subscribe if you have not yet. So until next time, minions, keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs. We'll see you Thursday. Stay ruthless.